The housing crisis is wreaking havoc nationally. Our podcast discusses how it is playing out specifically in Black Berkeley, California, chronicling the lived experiences behind what people call gentrification, detailing our endeavor for our right to stay and our right to return. Brought to you by Healthy Black Families. I am your host, Deb, and this is Telling Our Stories, the Housing Chronicles. Welcome. In this part 2 of our 3-part interview, we continue our conversation with Anna Cash, Community Development Project Coordinator at City of Berkeley, Jassmin Poyaoan, former Program Director of the Community Economic Justice Clinic at the East Bay Community Law Center, and Ayanna Davis, Deputy Executive Director at Healthy Black Families. So let's pivot a little bit and get into the nuts and bolts. I would love it if, Jassmin, you can break down what is a policy?
In general, policy interchangeably is be a law, it could be a program. And in this case, we were trying to create law, some rules to follow. In this case, to have affordable housing developers to follow.
You can have laws, right? So what would be the difference between a policy and a law, and what makes a policy necessary?
So I see policies as just part of solutions to a problem. And I think we've spent most of our time talking about what the big problem is, right, when it comes to housing. And that is that housing is just unaffordable and inaccessible to a lot of people and a lot of folks in the communities that do our work in, and then that we care about, and where we're from. And we noticed the problem of, affordable housing going through a lottery system, right? Like it was very rare for affordable housing or housing units that were below market rate to be built. But another layer of that is once they were built, the application process to get into into those units were sometimes thousands of people long. Like, you really had to be very lucky to even have a chance and at any of these units. And we noticed that this was an issue. We also noticed the big systemic issue of folks being displaced along racial lines, seeing that the majority of communities being displaced in South and West Berkeley were of the Black community. And as Mama Ayanna described, right, there was this concept that we wanted to really move with in terms of right to return, being able to take folks who have been displaced or experienced that displacement to be able to come back and have first dibs on the units that were below market rate. And so just a little bit about the background of why we wanted a policy, why we wanted a specific solution. It's because of that specific problem that we were noticing.
Thank you, Jassmin. So would you say it's like some sort of agreement that a community, in this case, sometimes government, come into around how to deal with something that needs to be done?
Yeah. So the nuts and bolts, the policy is just kind of an agreement, expectations of how certain thing is going to be dealt with, right? And in this case, right, we had to come to an agreement as to how we were going to deal with who has access to these below market rate units. And so, yes, to your point, yeah.
Can you guys walk us through the City of Berkeley's history with preference policy?
Yeah, so in terms of the city's history, the City of Berkeley has over 20 anti-displacement policies and initiatives across the three Ps: protections for low-income renters, preservation of existing affordable housing, and production of new affordable housing. But this is the first housing preference policy in the city of Berkeley, the first preference policy, and the first really of those anti-displacement initiatives that specifically would pave a path for people to return to Berkeley if they've been displaced from the city. And, Jassmin spoke to, well, we've all spoken about the fact that displacement is a crisis here, but also regionally, also nationally. And Berkeley is a very attractive place to live. So when there are affordable housing lotteries, there are a lot of applications. And for folks who are maybe struggling to stay in their community or who have already been displaced, they were, previously competing in a lottery with everyone else with no real advantage to get access to a way to come home. And so I think this is a unique anti-displacement policy in the sense that it addresses the displacement. It's one piece of addressing the displacement that has already occurred. And, in terms of the history, I think Ayanna can speak to over several years, the community organizing that's really the beginning of this story in terms of the city of Berkeley's history with preference policies. So I'd tee her up for that. But that community advocacy really led to the city's commitments, to a preference policy on the future affordable units at Ashby and North Berkeley BART stations, and to a 2019 city council referral which helped kick off this process within the city. And that referral was to create policies to develop a right to return for Berkeley's displaced residents. And just, to quote from the referral, especially people of color, including the African-American communities who have been displaced. So that was a city council referral that helped kicked off the process within the city. And, Ayanna could speak to the history of the organizing that led to those efforts.
Thank you. I think we all organized together. This was not the East Bay Community Law Center with Jassmin and Anna as part of the fellow for the, Challenge Grant? Yeah, from San Francisco Foundation, and the support of the San Francisco Foundation to make this happen. And then, of course, Healthy Black Families. One of the things that we started with is, as we went over the Berkeley Considers preference policy survey, and then we created the Right to Stay, Right to Return affordable housing survey. And I really want to point this out. We do speak to Black and other people of color, and other displaced people, but predominantly in Berkeley, the displaced have been Black people. And tens of thousands of Black people have been displaced from Berkeley, as Anna said, disproportionately, even compared to other areas like San Francisco and Oakland. And many of us have lost family or had family and community members leave, lost housing. And as we began to take the survey, and we organized with Berkeley Black Ecumenical Ministers Alliance under the leadership of Pastor Michael Smith, Pastor Mike McBride, and Pastor Ambrose Carroll. And they were also organizing around the Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act. So we were able to build together, educating community around the need for a preference policy, as well as the need for the TOPA policy, and to educate community on housing as a human right, and the right to stay, right to return, what that means for a community. We first went to the Berkeley Black Leaders Group, then BEMA, then Friends of Adeline, and Healthy Black Families staff. It was very important part of bringing our community leadership to the forming of the preference policy, as well as the Healthy Black Families Board. And as I said, East Bay Community Law Center under Jassmin's leadership and Anna. We did participated in multiple equity forums, educating community that was led under Cheryl Davila and Willie Phillips, their work and the group, their committee that created those equity forums, as well as we held a Housing as a Human Right forum with BEMA. We spoke to other community groups and got the survey out there, but also it as an organizing strategy, as you educate community, right, while you're getting things done, then it began to have a level of activation with community as we were moving in COVID and then trying to move out of the pandemic shelter in place mode. I think when you have such a need as affordable housing and you've had such widespread documented discrimination, exclusionary practices and policies, institutionalized activities, right? I mean, then a community that's already a place for creating strategic unity. People coming together throughout the Adeline Corridor community, throughout Southwest Berkeley community, to organize, to support one another in being housed and being affordably housed. Because Berkeley has a really high economic demographic that is exclusionary in itself. So, and it set the bar. When we talk about thought leadership, we're also in Berkeley, we're also talking about conservative thought leadership. We don't think of Berkeley as a conservative community, and there's this forward-facing liberal community process that looks like, oh, this is a liberal community. But when you look at the policies and the shift that comes out of the University of California, out of the City of Berkeley, out of the Bay Area, and the cultures that are created, one of those things has been exclusionary housing, and through the process of creating unaffordable living spaces, whether it's housing, rental housing, and some of the other even alternatives. So affordable in Berkeley means you have to still make a lot of money to be able to afford to live in the city. So part of that work of the affordable housing preference policy is starting with new developments and developments that have affordable housing to ensure that those units are available. And what I have seen at this point is the city work really hard, and I believe it's under the mandate of Governor Newsom's office to create affordable units and get funding so that the city can create those affordable units. And then this is where the affordable housing preference policy will be implemented. Old housing or housing built prior to the preference policy is not going to come under the affordable housing preference policy. That means most of the housing in Berkeley and most of the rental housing in Berkeley.
Yeah. I want to dovetail off of a couple of things that intersect for me and what you said. The largest segment of humans that were pushed out of Berkeley were Black. We're in a situation in California, where we can't really use the word. I guess I'm wanting to bring in Prop 209 into this conversation because, as you're laying out the labor that went into this, into making this housing preference policy, it's all a method of going around to get to the bottom line, which is Black people were displaced and we're trying to bring back Black people. But yeah, I guess, Jassmin, can you talk about Prop 209?
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about Prop 209. Not my favorite, favorite policy or law, but for those who don't know, Prop 209 is it's a law that prohibits any public entities that include cities, city governments, from discriminating against or granting preferences to anyone based on race, sex, ethnicity, or national origin in three specific contexts. There's employment, there's a public education, and public contracting. And so because these agreements, right, that or the preference policy would be dealing with agreements between the city of Berkeley and these developers who are creating the housing, that falls under public contracting. And so hence triggers Prop 209, hence the City of Berkeley can't be explicit and say, hey, we want to give a preference to this specific community based on race. And so part of, I don't think it's I'm like thinking, is this too much to say? But it is kind of an obsession. But part of like my obsession with just trying to poke holes in Prop 209 was just wanting to figure out, well, how do we get what the community leaders group through the right to return, right to own, right to stay, right to own survey, how can we get as close to what the survey results are calling for without triggering or without, violating Prop 209. In a perfect world, we wouldn't have Prop 209 restricting this type of policy. But, given that we need to build momentum to change Prop 209 or to repeal it, and we didn't have that time to do it while, housing is being built, we decided as a group to just come as close to it. And so the preference policy doesn't explicitly give, or at least, I don't know, actually. So context, I transitioned out of my role in 2021. And so wasn't able to kind of keep up and see what version of the policy was passed. But long story short, we did research at EBCLC to come up with some certain parameters to guide the city on language for the preference policy to ensure that they would have some legs to stand on against any potential lawsuit. But yeah, that's I don't know, Anna, if you wanted to fill in kind of where I left off since you continued on with the passage and implementation.
You're the attorney, so I'm grateful for your definition of Prop 209. I think one thing to add would be there's also a lot of state funding in affordable housing in the city of Berkeley, so it ties in there as well. But I think it's been said, there's been significant race-specific harm in this city, and fair housing law and Prop 209 don't allow us to take race-specific action to remedy that harm. So passing the preference policy really required navigating the legal constraints of Prop 209 and fair housing law while navigating the reality that housing policy has created unequitable outcomes for people of color, low-income communities, specifically Black people in the city of Berkeley. So that was not only a challenge in the policy design, but was very difficult to process, I guess one piece of context I would add too is, the preference policy can kind of help make sure new affordable housing in Berkeley can address displacement in a more targeted way. And Ayanna spoke to the kind of growth in affordable housing in Berkeley. There are, bigger historic commitments to affordable housing right now in Berkeley that represent a better opportunity to achieve those anti-displacement policy goals. So that includes the $135 million Measure O bond that the voters passed, dedicated to affordable housing, recognizing the need for affordable housing in this community. And $53 million of that is dedicated to affordable housing at Ashby and North Berkeley BART stations. And Measure O has really led to a faster pace of affordable housing development in the city of Berkeley. So there's over 1,000 units of locally subsidized affordable units in the city's pipeline. And with so much new affordable housing getting built, Berkeley needed a policy today that could be implemented today to leverage those housing opportunities to be distributed more equitably with a focus on those who have experienced displacement. And I'm hoping that we'll talk more about the Maudel Miller-Sharrock development that's going up at 2001 Ashby. And, that's many units right there, a great example of putting this into practice and beginning to reverse the trends of displacement that we've been talking about.
Yes, absolutely. Let me ask one more question about the process of getting this housing preference policy to be out in the world, birthed and ready for feeding and diapers. I would like a timeline. When did it finally pass? Anna, if you could answer that.
The preference policy was adopted by City Council on July 11th, 2023, and became effective on January 1, 2024.
That's great.
And I can go into more depth on the timeline, was just directly answering the...
Yeah, sure. Go into depth a little bit.
Yeah, so we've already spoken to years of community organizing that, as I said, is the beginning of this story, and then city efforts that came out of that push. And then from 2020 to 2022, folks on this call came together with the support of the Partnership for the Bay's Future Challenge Grant. And there was, and Ayanna and Jassmin can really speak to this, but there was a lot of labor and community involvement in shaping the policy and moving it forward at that time. So EBCLC kicked off a community leaders group, and then Healthy Black Families came on board, as Mama Ayanna said, at the request of the community to help lead that process. And we've spoken about the surveys that went out, the city survey, and then Healthy Black Families, Right to Stay, Right to Return, Right to Own survey, and the other outreach that Healthy Black Families led during that time. So, I think with the support of the Challenge Grant, the city really wanted to ensure that those most impacted by displacement shape the policy and honor the expertise of lived experience in that policymaking process, that policy development process. So the community leaders group met on several occasions to design an outreach plan and survey, interpret those survey results, put forward community recommendations for the policy, and discuss the different policy options. And that was all happening between 2020 and 2022. So, getting started right at the beginning of COVID, which of course was a challenge, a significant challenge. And then the Housing Advisory Commission supported the community proposal at 2 meetings in spring 2022 and recommended as an advisory body to council that those community recommendations move forward to council. Then the policy went to council for a work session in February 2023, where council learned in depth about the policy and provided feedback. So, the support of the council was key. They supported the policy overwhelmingly with a unanimous vote in July 2023. As I said, it was adopted on July 11, 2023. After that, we entered an implementation planning phase. Yes, a celebration for that unanimous vote, for sure. After that, we entered an implementation planning phase, and the policy became effective January 1, 2024, which is also definitely worth some celebration. As you can hear, it was a journey. Yeah. So we're there, yeah. And now the hard work starts.
Yeah. Thank you for laying that timeline out. I think it's very important. There's just so much work that goes into, this.
And I don't want to say now the hard work starts because it's been hard work.
Yeah.
The hard work continues, right?
The hard work continues. Exactly.
So we have a victory here, right? January 1st, this policy was implemented. Now the next steps are, and this is where the hard work comes in, getting people to fill out the affordable housing preference. What is it, a survey, Anna? It's online? Yeah.
There's certificate applications if your family, experienced displacement due to the BART construction or due to foreclosure. Those are two preferences that the city will help pre-certify people for so that things can move quicker during affordable housing application processes. So, yeah, getting the word out is key.
The website is up so that people can go to the city website and learn about it and fill out their application for the certificate. Then we will have to inform and keep developers in alignment with the policy so that they are implementing it and making sure that people do have a right to return and a place to stay, not just a right to stay, but an affordable place to stay and live. And we continue the work to put these infrastructure in place, make sure that the developers are creating community benefits and make sure the needs of our community are taken care of.
We have a way that people who want to plug into this can plug into this, right? So, Anna, can you walk us through what that is? Like, where's the website? What documents might be needed? What are different ways of help people can get?
So there's three main ways that people can plug into the policy. First is if you're looking for and applying to affordable housing. You can go to the Alameda County Housing Portal. So if you Google that, you'll find that and apply for affordable housing in Berkeley. So as of January 29, Maudel Miller Shark will be a listing that's on the Alameda County Housing Portal. And, for new affordable housing buildings in Berkeley, the preferences will be incorporated into the new affordable housing applications for units subject to the preference policy on that portal. So the application will provide the opportunity to select the preferences you're eligible for. And if you're selected for an interview at a unit, at that point, you would provide some additional information to verify eligibility for specific preferences. And then, as I mentioned, there are two preferences that can be sort of pre-approved prior to applying for affordable housing. So if you or your family experienced displacement due to the construction of BART in Berkeley, or if you experienced foreclosure in Berkeley and you're interested in applying to affordable housing, you should really apply as soon as possible for a certificate. So you can go to berkeleyca.gov/housing-preferences or Google Berkeley housing preferences. I know it's a long URL to learn more about that. And those certificates will be used to verify eligibility for the preferences when you apply for an affordable housing unit. And the BART construction displacement certificate gives your household a first priority in the affordable housing lotteries. And then the second thing you can do is really stay informed. I'd like to encourage everybody listening to sign up for housing updates on the berkeleyca.gov/housing-preferences page. You can learn there also about info sessions about the policy and just have the most up-to-date information on the preferences. And, lastly, just have conversations with your neighbors, friends, and community about the preference policy. We know the power of community is what led to this policy being implemented today. So help people learn about the policy, encourage them to apply for certificates if they're eligible, and to the new affordable housing units with preferences.
Thank you. You will find links to both the Moddell Sherrick Building and Berkeley's brand new housing preference policy page, which will be on the City of Berkeley's website, in the liner notes of this podcast. Application for the Moddell Sherrick Building is slated to close on February 12th. That's a week from the airing of this episode. For those who have had their family home seized by eminent domain in South Berkeley because of the initial Ashby-Bart build, we urge you to apply to get your certificate under this new preference policy so you can be positioned to have a higher chance of getting any of the upcoming housing options that might become available in Berkeley. Good luck. Written, edited, and hosted by Deborah Hailu, Telling Our Stories program coordinator at Healthy Black Families, Inc. Audio engineered by Ayanna Davis and Salim Naji-Ullah of One Hitter Entertainment. Shout out to James Shields of Creative Shields for our beautiful podcast artwork. Akila Shahid, Office and Media Manager at Healthy Black Families, Inc. for the many ways she steps up and bridges our gaps. And Wilhelmina Wilson, Executive Director at Healthy Black Families, Inc. for bringing all of this together. Casting out the net of Black love in service of all humanity, this has been Telling Our Stories, the Housing Chronicles. See you next time.